YouTube. Let's discuss two problems: number of islands and number of closed islands. Leetcode problem number 200, which is the number of islands, and Leetcode problem number 1254, which is the number of closed islands. So before we discuss, please share, like, subscribe, and hit the bell button for notifications. Also, I have added a lot of quizzes to the community page. Please check it out. So a island is a closed island only if it is not touching the boundary. So if any part of the thing is, you are given a grid and any part is touching the boundary and it is an island, then technically it is not an island because that's the boundary. So you don't know whether there could be land or water outside of that boundary. So you don't know that. So it is not a closed island. Closed island is something which is surrounded by water, and it is inside. On all sides it is surrounded by the water, not by the boundary. So I just thought that this is very confusing in terms of number of islands, closed islands. Like in number of islands, there is a flip which is a land and which is water. So I just thought, like, let us do land and water, the characters land and water, rather than actually using ones and zeros. So we can basically parameterize which land, what does the land represent? Is one land or zero land? So it is actually in 200 and 1254 they actually flip. One is water in one case, one is land in another case. So I, instead of all that stuff, so I just parameter, and then also, like, there are a lot of similarities between these two problems. So I just thought, let us develop just one code with parameters for both of these, so that way you can see in a different angle of these two problems. So now in the case of DFS, right, the only thing is in the count islands, if it is closed is true, then it becomes problem number 1254. You are checking for closed islands. Otherwise it is just the number of islands, problem number 200. So if the grid is empty, then there are no islands. Then you start off with count equals to 0, and then you go through the grid, and the moment you see the land, then you do a DFS. So this DFS basically is to mark, once you find a land, say for example we are dealing with problem number 200. Once you find a land, then you actually supposed to increase the count. So DFS, all it does is just marks the neighbors as it flips the neighbors once to 0, so that you can get all the stretch the island as much as possible if it is stretching the island. That's all it does. So in the case of problem 200, it just goes and explores all the other neighboring lands and then converts them into water. So that's the pattern. Actually, DFS, you DFS the neighbors patterns. So if you, and in the case of, you cannot increase the count of the land in the case of 1254 for the closed island, because you have to check whether there is any border, top, left, right, and bottom, if there is any border there or not. So if it is touching the boundary, then you cannot increase this count. But in the case of 200, this one just returns true. This one doesn't mean anything other than marking the neighbors, flipping from 1 to 0. It does nothing for 200, but for 1254 it checks whether if there is a boundary or not. If it is not a boundary, then it is a closed island, then the count goes up. Otherwise it does not. So let us look at the DFS, what it does. So it takes that same input parameter grid, and then takes the coordinate I and j, and then checks the close check, and then these two are basically tell like 1 and 0 character, land or water. So in this is the one which actually works for 1254, the closed islands one. If it is if it touching the grid, so it is, and if it is closed check is true, then you return false because it is touching the grid. So you do the negative of is closed check. Otherwise, you actually, if it is water, you return true because there's no land here, and then you convert this land into water, and then you start exploring the neighbors. Mm, top, bottom, left, right. So by adjusting the i's and j's basically, and then passing these three parameters will be the same. So they are passed from main basically for 1254 or once it is 200 or 1254, these values are constant, they're fixed. So you pass in from the main function if you want to solve closed islands or number of islands or open islands if you want to call that. And now if it is a closed island, then you want to make sure all of them are true, which basically means that it is not touching the boundaries on the top or bottom or left or right, because we returned if it touches the boundary, we return false here. Otherwise it returns true. In the case of 200, it just returns the true. It is not doing anything other than marking the neighbors. You are not over counting the number of islands, because if there are two ones or two land pieces next to each other, it is part of the same island, not two islands. So that's all it is. I think if you have any questions or comments, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video. Actually, I can show if there is. Yeah, this is the main is there. So this is how you can see grid for problem 200. You return false. You are not checking for closed islands. And then 1 0. 1 is land and 0, and in the case of 1254 you return true. See, they are flipped here. So land is 0 and water is 1. So hopefully this helps. It gives a different perspective on these two problems, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.